Hello and welcome to my kitchen and kitchen chats. I'm Aimee Kandrac and I'm your host. And today I have Ashley Butler here in my kitchen with me. And we are going to talk about, originally we were going to talk about help that can be had inside of your home when there's a major life event. And just to back up a quick second and remind everyone, we're here in my kitchen because when some major life event happens, you call your friends and they come into the kitchen and you figure shit out. You figure out what needs to happen next. And sometimes it's things inside of the house. So before we get started on our original topic, which I'm excited to then dive into other topics around that, my first question for you, Ashley, is do you have a moment that you're willing to share with anyone when you have been at a kitchen counter or kitchen table?
That's a really great question. I think probably like most of the listeners, we have multiple moments. The one that really comes to mind for me, this is pretty personal. So the one that comes to mind for me was a conversation that was had back in March of 2020. It was at a counter, much like this. And it was when I made the decision to step away from medicine. It was a realization, I think, that had been building in me for quite some time. Understanding that while I have a healer's heart and I believe in the well-being and support of people, medicine was not allowing me to bring that healing and wellness to people in a way that I found fulfilling. I had a moment with my husband and actually with Sherri, where we sat down and I had to share that I was going to be stepping away. And this was before I had, made an announcement or anything like that to anyone that I worked with. And that was a big moment, I think, for my husband, also Sherri, who had been taking care of me, throughout this whole long journey. And she said to me, and I'll never forget this, who makes being a doctor plan B?
Wow.
And I said, this girl. But it was a life-altering decision and moment. And it was because I think a lot of these moments, they revolve around, okay, where do we go now? What do we do now? Right? Mm-hmm. And for me, it was, this is no longer a healthy relationship for me.
Yeah. And this was in March of 2020 before things actually got even worse, probably.
Yeah. So I had to make a decision. I appreciate you repeating that back to me because I realized I'm a year off. It was March of 2021.
Oh,
so okay. It was a year.
Oh, so it was a year. Had done a whole year of COVID.
Yep. That would be my own brain fog happening right now as we have this discussion. So it was March of 2021.
Okay.
And I just thought I can't and I won't engage in this way any longer.
That's a really, really hard, big thing. And I know so often I think of, all these major life events are health related and this was, right?
Oh,
This was your own personal mental health and you couldn't help anyone else the way you really desired to do so.
Yes. Yep.
So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I know how personal those kinds of things are, but I want to touch on one thing that I have not shared with our listeners yet. And the main reason I called you is because of your new company. You are the founder and CEO of MySherri. And do you want to share just a quick background on that?
Sure. So I alluded to, I guess I mentioned Sherri.
You did.
She came into my home and she became a trusted member of our family, essentially helping run the day-to-day of the household. And, for busy women, I think that a lot of times we're sort of convinced that we should be doing it all, to have it all. And Sherri had completely transformed the relationship that I had with my home, my life, my husband, because she was able to free up time that I just couldn't find anywhere else. And so what we decided to do after I'd received multiple questions from friends and colleagues at work about, well, where do I find a Sherri? My answer was always, I don't know, but you cannot have mine. Not Sherri.
And a true, I feel that.
But because I received that question so much, we decided that we would set out on this mission to create a company where we are able to give valuable time back to busy women by providing highly trained, highly vetted, quality people to come into your home and become a trusted resource where that to-do list that follows you around your house every single day can be downloaded to someone on our team who becomes your home coordinator. They learn Aimee. They learn Aimee's household, right? And they know what it is that you need, and they're there for you, right? Because as we talk about this help and we talk about, what do women really need? What do women really want? And I think it's time. It's the most precious resource that we just can't get more of.
Mm-hmm.
And so MySherri is meant to provide this trusted resource. We have one client, she refers to it as like having Alice from the Brady Bunch in her home.
Oh.
And it works really well, right? That makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense.
We're not the housekeeper. Lots of people already have those. We're not the nanny. Lots of people already have those. We're the in-between for all of the stuff that has to happen that you hope your husband's going to help with, and then he doesn't do it right.
No comment.
And we're a company built by women for women. We understand what it feels like to have that task list going through your mind and the relief that comes from having it done.
The relief that comes from having it done is so... you can't state that strong enough. Whenever I have allowed myself to have someone in to help me with those kinds of things, whether it be someone who's willing to throw in a load of laundry or someone who's willing to run some errands for me, it is such a relief. And it's hard. And it is so hard to say, okay, these are all of the things that I need to get done. This is the mental load.
Yep.
Right? This is the mental load that I have right now. And right now, this very second, one of the biggest things in my mental load is that I have some COVID brain fog.
Yeah.
Right? And so I can't even remember sometimes all of those things that I know I need to get done, because by the time I walk into the next room, I've already had 15 other things come to mind, and I forget that, oh yeah, I needed to get these 4 things at the grocery, and I forgot to write them down right then.
Yep.
So, but let's talk about the willingness to allow someone else to help you with those things.
I love that you bring that up, right? Because, and I talk about this quite a bit. There is a distinct difference, and I think you understand this in what you do, right? There's a distinct difference between asking for help and being willing to receive the help. 2 different things. 2 different mountains to climb, largely for women, right?
Huge.
And
I think for men too.
Oh, agreed. Yeah. Yes. I want to say, just because my husband will hear this, he listens to all of my podcasts. He is my biggest fan, 100% supportive. He is my biggest fan, and he he also struggles, right? With when to ask for help. It feels different, and I think it presents itself differently for both of us.
It does. It does. And I think for, when I started What Friends Do, it's not just women who experience major life events, but it often falls on women, sisters, moms, best friends, next door neighbors, who are going to start to fill in all of those gaps. But I think for the men in the situations, it's really weird and awkward to say, oh, someone's coming in and, helping around our house. Like, we should be capable of doing this. All of that said, going back to the mental load really usually falls on the women, right? And it usually, not that the men aren't capable of doing it, it's just not how it's set up in our culture.
Correct.
Most of the time.
Right.
So it's so hard.
Yeah. And we have the statistics, right? The data exists to support the fact that even in a fairly split relationship, right, women still manage more. They manage more in terms of time and calendaring and childcare and the household duties. And it's not that our partners are not supportive or they don't want to help. But to your point, in what we're building, there's an underlying cultural movement here in terms of what it is that we're starting to reframe and rewrite the stories, I think, that women tell themselves about what their worth is, where their work is, and how those two things can be separated.
Right.
And, this receiving help piece, when you talk about allowing someone to come into your home, it's really fascinating to be a part of that process, to be a part of that story with our clients, right? And you're right? The women who are part of that conversation, or maybe they have a male partner who is part of that conversation, and how they see those two things a lot of times are different. How they see the help coming into the home. It's fascinating. I would say that in our experience, men are significantly less likely to want anyone doing their laundry.
Right.
Which is really interesting, right?
Thank God in my house, my husband does the laundry, because otherwise it just wouldn't
get done.
Like it would just be, it would be a long time.
I love it. I love it.
And my son does all of his own laundry too, which is also good because I gag at bad smells.
Oh, yeah.
And he is an athlete and I can't do it.
Yeah. Also a teenager. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
That's a really special.
It's
special environment.
Anyway, I digress. Sorry for the interruption.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, but this is part of it, right? Like the weird smells and the
yes.
The conversation that I get to have is it's okay to receive this help, and we understand that life is messy, right? It's not perfect. It's not the curated, Instagram reel. That's not real life. And
Right.
I think that we are doing a disservice to ourselves by inundating our brains with this perfect imagery. It's bullshit.
It is.
And I don't think it's fair, right? It's this concept of work-life balance on steroids. We're convincing women, we're writing the stories for them to say that they should be able to do it all. And this is exactly what it looks like. And with MySherri, what we're doing is we're saying, look, it takes a team. We want to be on that team with you because we understand that your passions and your impact probably doesn't lie in folding towels. And that's okay.
And if it does, there's probably something else that your passion does not lie.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I talk a lot about what are the gifts that you have when you want to help someone else. Right? I love to cook for people. Please do not ask me to walk your dog and pick up the dog poop. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Yep.
I will organize stuff for you. I'm also not the medical provider, healer. I cannot even look at my own bandages and wounds.
Yep.
So looking at what are you good at?
Mhm.
What brings you joy when you're helping someone else or when you're helping yourself?
Great. Yep.
And what else can you offload?
Yep. That's exactly right. And I think that's a part of this story. I was talking with someone before we did this conversation today, and one of the things that I think we see a lot, we experience a lot, is we walk into a home, we ask people, please don't tidy up the home, don't get it ready for us. Like, we need to see it as it lives and breathes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because they're like, oh, well, I don't want you to look in that closet right now. Totally fine. Totally fine. But keep in mind that much like a patient-physician relationship, if you're not willing to share with us where the problem really lies, it's difficult to help.
Mm-hmm.
And that is this bridge, this divide between asking for help and receiving help. And if you're only sharing half the story, how can we really serve you, right?
Right. So one thing that, because I see this daily with what friends do, people reach out and say, I mean, seriously, it's daily. Something happened to my friend, something happened to my sister, but she doesn't think she needs any help. I don't know what to do because I know she's going to need help, right? Because bridging that gap to say, sometimes people don't even know what help they need.
Correct.
And I know personally how hard it is. I have a somewhat amusing story for others, not so much for myself. But a few years ago, I was going to the grocery and got hit by a car walking into I was just in the parking lot. It was low speed, but I broke my foot and my wrist. And I had 2 kids at home who couldn't drive yet. And my husband was working out of state part-time.
Yep.
But I did not need any help.
Except you're missing like 2 key components of your body, which is a functional arm and hand and a foot.
Correct.
Okay.
And both on the right side.
I wanted to reflect that. Hold that mirror up. Reflect that back to you. Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right.
Right side, not really super conducive to driving, getting my own cup of coffee in the morning, really any of those kinds of things. But I did not need any help. So I remember really clearly laying on the sofa and my mom and sister coming in, and it was like full on intervention. They're like, so here's the deal. We know that you are not well, but you're refusing to allow other people to help you puts a huge burden on my mom and sister, who had to pick up all of the slack. And my kids, who then they were little.
Yeah.
And allowing other people to step in to do a couple of little things here and there allowed my mom and sister and husband, when he was home, and my kids to help me heal in other ways and to allow them to have their life function somewhat normally.
Yep.
Because not allowing the help to come in and my refusal for many days to allow people to bring me food or drive me places really put a huge burden on other people. And that was, not everybody gets hit by the car that often. But I think going back to just day-to-day things, there are a lot of those instances in so many lives where you can focus on other things in your life, right?
Yep. Well, and I love that you bring that up, right? When you talk about the impact, not only to yourself, and I cannot even imagine the headspace that you were in at that particular time, right? Not like everything that you're already going through physically, but then the mental load of like, I want to be able to do these things, right?
Right.
And what that does to you mentally and emotionally, and how that impacts the physical healing and all of those things, right? It's all tied together. I think we tend to separate all of this and we compartmentalize and box it up, but it's all connected. And when you talk about the impact to the others in the home, that is, in my humble opinion, the coolest part of the story, right? That not only are we writing here at MySherri, but I think about the ripple effect of what happens when Aimee feels well and is able to be present. What does that look like then when she's able to spend quality time with her children? Because her mind isn't all over the place, right? When she's able to spend quality time with her husband, when she's able to spend quality time with herself, reflecting and meditating or reading, right? What impact does that have, and the ripple effect does that have when we're able to be a better version of ourselves because we're not stuck up in our minds, shoulding all over ourselves?
I am a guilt-ridden, guilt-driven person, right? And but sometimes the guilt gets to be so much that I just don't get things done, right? And that's in a non-major life event.
Right. That's just like the day-to-day
That's just
struggle.
like,
right.
This is kind of where we fall. Like, nothing big going on and still piles of laundry. We'll pretend that that's the only issue that I need help with, okay? Because that's the of the dirty things, the cleanest one, right? But not everyone has the opportunity to have MySherri.
Yep.
But there are still things, especially when there is a crisis of any kind, where your friends can come in, and I think it's a little more awkward sometimes with your friends, though, right? For me, if I'm hiring someone to come in and clean my house or something like that, it's different than if my friend is coming and saying, I'll just clean up after you.
Right.
But that's not always optional. So I try to think as I'm going through what friends do and giving people suggestions of things that can be done, of different things in the house that people can step in to do. Are there things that when you start with a new client, you're like, or you tell your staff, everyone's going to be fine if you clean the kitchen sink,
right?
Or I don't know. What are some of those things that then friends could step in and say, okay, this is going to be one of the easier ways to just be able to step in and do a little something?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because I think that in our experience, I mean, we have our most popular services, which is meal prep, home care, lots of laundry, lots of dishes, right? Those are the things that I think it feels to people like that's where I'm going to go. Like, that's the lane I'm going to stay in. I'm going to bring a lasagna. But before you know it, that friend who's in need has 17 lasagnas in their freezer.
Oh, I've got a lasagna law. Because when my son was born, we had 5 lasagnas in 5 days. But anyway.
I mean, so yes, people need to eat. Absolutely. Absolutely, they need to eat. But they also need things that I think we tend to forget about, right? They need to make sure that, plants are getting watered, phone calls are being made. Oh, was that appointment today? Like, I completely spaced it. Can someone call and cancel that appointment and get it rescheduled? Like, just get me on the calendar for 6 weeks from now. I think that there's a lot of like the little, what I think we think of it as mundane or trivial, but it stacks up in our minds, right? It's the errands, it's the appointment scheduling, it's making sure that, oh my gosh, is Jimmy going to have a ride from soccer practice back home? Right. Because I can't do it right now.
Has anyone taken the cat to the vet?
Exactly. And it's that kind of stuff that I think it just piles up. And while we're talking about piles, I think mail's another big thing. Honestly, if you want to do one thing, we call it a drop zone.
Yeah. Oh, I'm pretty sure my mail is hidden.
Yeah.
That got hidden before you showed up.
Yep. But that's a real thing, right? And so one of the things that our staff does a lot for our clients, but it would be easy, just go pick up the mail from the mailbox, make 3 piles, right? This looks really important. This looks like it's sort of entertainment, and this is clearly junk, right? 3 piles, and just have it set up and say, hey, I'm happy to take care of this entertainment pile and the junk pile. I'm not going to go through like all of your like important stuff for you unless you ask me to do that. But then get rid of that clutter, that drop zone area for them, because it just stacks up. You know that I just had COVID, right? And bless my home coordinator, who was able to come in like after I got out of quarantine and get me caught back up, but she wasn't able to come into my home while I was sick, right? So I'm watching just like this stack of mail, not having the energy to even get off the couch, and I'm just watching it stack up. And if someone could literally just sort my mail, you know? And so it's little stuff like that. And it's stuff that I don't think we even give ourselves credit for how much it weighs on us.
Well, that's a fascinating one that I have not. My husband and kids are fantastic, but if I'm ever out of town, my mail will not get taken out of the mailbox. Like, just doesn't even occur to them that anything would happen with it.
Yep.
And that is not one that I've had on the What Friends Do list for long. But I think we're going to add it, because that's something that as a neighbor, I could just go and every day, and there's some personal stuff in there, right?
Sure.
Like, you don't want to have, and so there's some like sensitive information that could be in your mail, but being able to sort that out so that you don't have the stacks and stacks of mail. That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah. It's a really popular, it's part of what we do, right? People don't even really have to ask it. We just do it. But it really does. And honestly, you know, when my home coordinator is off on vacation, I realize like my mail doesn't get checked anymore. That just doesn't even occur to me. Someone else manages the mail and the packages, right?
Right.
But that would be something that I would share, you know, with your listeners. It's something we don't think about, but is so important.
It's so important. And so often when some kind of tragedy strikes, or unexpected, or long term, right? Yep. These are the not even mundane, like they really are pretty important and critical. But if I can go through a small stack that I know is important, instead of 6 inches or a foot of junk. I mean, 90% of it. I'm sorry, USPS, but like,
I know.
It really makes me sad.
Me too. And when I think about that, you know, you bring up such a great point. I have a story. So when my uncle died, my aunt, of course, was in the grieving process and going through all of this, right? And I remember her sharing that she had a utility bill was simply overlooked because it got lost in the pile that became a part of her home after her husband had passed. And she didn't realize that she hadn't paid this utility bill, you know, until they essentially shut it off. And she was like, I don't not pay my bills. You know, this is not a part of what I do, but it got mixed in with everything and completely overlooked.
Because that's the kind of thing that can also just be really overwhelming sometimes, especially if that is something that maybe someone else in the house was in charge of. If you don't have it on auto pay. I mean, that's a huge one. And I have heard that many times. I think that is something that's not as unusual, unfortunately. And something that, I mean, I can think of one friend off the top of my head who I would trust her to come in, go through, and we have most of our bills set up on auto pay. I don't know why we've got like 3 or 4 that aren't. I whatever. We'll just like, we just don't. And there's, you know, the random doctor's bill that will come in, especially when things are, when there's something else that's taking priority for me.
Yep.
But I would trust this friend to come in and even open them all up. I would trust her to write out the checks. I remember actually after my dad died, my mom had friends who came over, and he was in the hospital for a really long time before he passed away. And I know there were literally mountains of bills and medical bills that they had to go through and sort through. And it's so hard to say, okay, wait, this one's still waiting on insurance. I don't know if I need to pay it yet.
Yep.
But friends who aren't as close to it can also sometimes have just a little more rational response. And that response might even be, let's just pay the $25 minimum so that it doesn't move anywhere.
Yep.
And when you have the mental space to look into this further, we can do that. Or maybe they can help you look into it.
Yep. Yeah. And that particularly in sort of an acute process. I think too that particularly with grief, that's another place where I think you could probably speak to this as well. But I can tell you as a physician, kind of watching that process happen and then having personal experience with it, I just feel like we tell people like, hey, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, like 3 days bereavement, you're good, right? You're good, right? And it's a whole process. And in that process, mail's still piling up, right? And so having someone like you mentioned, who you feel comfortable doing that. I mean, I think it's something that's just, it can be a part of showing how you care, and you're not stacking another lasagna in the freezer.
Right. Well, and there's some people who don't want to make you a lasagna.
This girl.
And there are some people that, this is what they're good at.
Right. Yep.
Right. And I think people often forget how good it feels to be asked to help. It is such an honor.
Yeah.
If someone were to invite me in for such an intimate thing. And there are some intimate things, again, like do not, please do not make me look at your wounds because it will not go well. Like I will probably pass out or throw up. I'm not even kidding. No, I'm serious.
Well, if you can set those boundaries with people, I mean, I think it's really important, right? For you to say, as someone who's like being invited into the home, here is what I can absolutely do for you.
Right. Well, and anyone who was going to ask me probably is gonna be like, yeah, that's not.
No,
like
that's
we're not
Aimee's
doing
strong
that.
suit.
Like she's not asking me for that. But when they do ask me to help with the things that I am good at, it feels really good.
Yeah.
And that was the thing going back to when I finally gave in. And of course, my family already had a What Friends Do page set up for me. And like, they were already like, this was not an optional activity for me. But I got to see so many people who I didn't realize cared that much. And cared that much is probably not really the right term.
Right.
But people want to help if you allow them.
That is right. Yep.
So, but that's part of that bridge that you were talking about earlier between asking for help and receiving it.
Right.
You have to be comfortable with all of the messiness in between.
Correct. Yeah. And that, bridging the gap is sometimes the hardest part. And in my experience with MySherri, I can tell you, and you've probably experienced this too, I can have lots of conversations with folks at that part where they're asking for the help. And then they completely get overwhelmed.
Oh yeah.
And if like they're not even sure how to go from asking to the receiving. And that piece is so overwhelming that sometimes they just get stuck, right? And so if having someone to walk that path with them has been something that we found really helps. Like we are with you every step of the way. And if you are a friend, someone trying to kind of step in and say, how can I help? What can I do? being okay with the time, the space, and the journey that they're going to have to walk. Because a lot of times, particularly in a situation where maybe something unexpected has happened, or maybe it's expected, but they didn't know how they would respond to it, right? So in those instances, excuse me, giving those people the time, the space, and the ability to kind of talk about it, because the vulnerability exists in the receiving of help. I think we've convinced people in our dialogue culturally that asking for help is the vulnerable part. I would say that's not accurate. In our experience, the vulnerable part is receiving.
I would agree with you 100%. I think people don't know how to ask because they're afraid of what the receiving response might be also.
Yeah.
And again, when they're, as you said so clearly, when something's going on, sometimes you don't even know what you need. And that is one of the things that, again, I see this all the time. And it's so much easier for the person immediately connected or one step removed. You know, it's easier for my sister to see the help that I need than it is for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's then easier for her to ask for help for me. And I don't know why it feels different receiving that.
Yeah, I don't know either. And, you know, it's really funny as I'm listening to you, you made a recommendation for an assistant for me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So in building this, I feel like this is a really vulnerable part, right? Because I don't want to sit here and have this conversation with you and convince people that I have my shit together, because I don't. And I, you know, in building this entire company, helping people ask for and then receive help, and I'm over here struggling. And I realize as we're sitting here having this conversation, I'm like, actually, I got stuck myself. I'm stuck in the gap of asking for help and then receiving, because it feels so overwhelming.
So overwhelming.
What do I ask for? How do I ask for it? How do I download it? Right? I know how to do that with my home like a champ, because I've been doing it for 5 years. But now what I need is a home coordinator for my business, also known as an executive assistant. and it's like, I'm stuck right now. I know I need help. I know I want help. And the receiving part has been a struggle for me.
That's, so because I go into problem solving mode. This is my gift. Again, like there are things that I'm good at, things I'm not good at. And so I go into problem solving mode, and I'm thinking kind of high level on both for you as business but why don't we just go to exactly what you said you do for your home? You know how to make that list. And something that I've heard from a couple of people is just start making a list of everything that you need help with. Like, it doesn't have to be organized. And whatever's at the top of the list is weighing on you so much that's probably also something someone else can come in and help with. And one tip that someone who used to work for me has given a lot of times is she likes to go over to a friend and just say, like, what is the biggest burden that you have right now? Maybe it's laundry, maybe it's dishes, like maybe it's my pantry is so messy, I can't find anything right now because people have been dropping food off all of the time and it's so unorganized. And it's so much easier for someone else to come in without the guilt and the attachment to the 50,000 extra grocery bags that you have shoved in your pantry, right? And can say, okay, I think you probably only need 5 of all of these things. But I think it's the same inside of your home as it is with your business. So this is a personal thing that I have trouble with when I'm receiving help. Is I don't know if I'm going to give the instruction correctly for how I would like it done. And how can I receive the help and be grateful for it, even if it's not done the way that I want it done?
Right.
And I like to pretend I'm getting better at it every year, but I don't know if I am. I'm sure there are people inside of my home who would disagree with me saying that I'm getting better at it, but I'm really trying to work on it because I think that's one of those huge gaps also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yep.
oh, well, I like my towels folded a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And my friend came in and helped and folded them a different way.
Yeah.
And what kind of, I don't like to use the word control, but what can we release and let go of that, okay, it's done for now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a one-time thing.
Right.
And I can cross it off.
Yep.
I don't know. I think that's I can't even get my head all the way around all of that right now.
Well, and I love that you bring that up because I experience that. I see that happen with our clients, right? There's a subset of individuals that we simply won't be able to serve. I guess if it's better for them to sort of sit in that situation and not be able to relinquish some level of control, which if we dig down deep enough comes a lot from trust, right?
Right.
And so, you know, I didn't know when we set out to build MySherri that we were also sort of like providing, like, there's just this process. We're not therapists, but we have conversations with people. And when you dig down deep enough, what barriers exist? Why do these barriers exist for you to be able to relinquish these items, right? Well, have I been let down by others before who have promised these things, right? Like, what is the perfection over, you know, good enough? Like, why perfection versus this is good enough, this is done for me and allows me to spend my time elsewhere? Where do those things come from?
Mm-hmm.
That's a struggle, I think, that a lot of people have. And we've seen not only in our clients, but like, I think it's, you know, it would be good enough to allow someone else to help me with scheduling and
Right.
all of these things, right? And so, again, if I'm going to dive down deep for myself, it probably comes to like a trust thing, like, and having friends, family, those types of people help you. You know, you have that trust, you have that communication established in a service like MySherri. That trust and quality has to be established, but that takes time, right? We're building relationships over time, and relationships only happen with good communication and the willingness to try. And what I tell every single one of our clients is I am never, ever going to promise you perfection because we are humans. Humans make mistakes. But what I will say is we will talk about it and we will figure out a way to move forward and make it right, right? Mm-hmm. And that's friendship, that's relationship. I mean, that's relationship 101.
Right.
That's what we're building. And it started with Sherri. And when Sherri came in to help me 5 years ago, I gave her a Kroger gift card that she was allowed to use to purchase my food. And I told her very explicitly, you are able to do this laundry and that's it. Do not touch anything else, right? Mm-hmm. And it was time and communication that created this relationship where if that woman came into my home, I would let her do anything that needed to be done because that's the relationship that we have, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a part of the process, but you have to be a willing participant in the process.
Right. And for people who are not, when someone gets dropped a life event unexpectedly, and they've not practiced this muscle, right? That's so incredibly hard. So I wonder for listeners who are just getting started, and by just getting started, I even mean myself, like what is the one thing that I can be working on to help allow someone else to help me? And how can I also show that I can be trusted to help someone else, right? Like, how do we culturally create those relationships to get started now so that that safety net is ready when something comes up?
Oh, that's a fantastic question.
I don't know if we have time to dig into it right now.
I don't know if I can give you the answer. I will say, if like my gut reaction to your question, and I'm not certain that this is the full answer or even the right answer. It's as I'm thinking about this, I think trusting yourself has to come first. That you have the ability, you have everything you need to communicate, right? And that you can trust yourself to be a part of this process, whether it is thrust upon you because something catastrophic has just happened, or it is something where you are at your wit's end and you're calling and having a conversation with me about, I just don't want to do this anymore, right? That is, you have to trust yourself and be willing to continually communicate. I think we have a lot of silent expectations. I think women, and gosh, my husband's going to listen to this too, right? I think things in my mind, I realize I do not say them to him, but all of a sudden there has been this expectation laid. He does not meet my expectation. Then all of a sudden he's in trouble. I'm fuming. He has no idea what he's done wrong.
Right.
And, and I think that can play out. And so what can we do? I think we can just trust ourselves to be willing to be a part of the process and be willing to show up and communicate.
I think you're right. And I think inviting people into our kitchens to start talking about this.
Having the conversations.
Start the conversations. We're running a little bit low on time, and I feel like we've opened the Pandora's box.
I know, right?
Right. And I want to dig in more, but I think that's going to have to be another one, mostly because my head is spinning around all of that. But let's just start with communication.
Yeah.
So it's been such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
So the first question is, what is your favorite thing to do for someone who is experiencing some life event?
So my favorite thing to do is to sit in the suck with them.
Sit in the suck. Perfect. And then my last question is, what is the best thing anyone has ever done for you?
The best thing that anyone has ever done for me is hold out a hand, help me get back up when I've fallen down, right? And doing that, it's more of a mental game for me. I live a lot in my mind, and sometimes I just need someone to be there to help pick me back up when I fall. And I think the most recent example, now I fall a lot, but the most recent example is what we started with, and it's when I decided to step away from medicine. I mean, I felt like I was falling, and there was no end, right? There was no bottom. And I had people in my life who were willing to say, nope, we've got you. And it's okay.
We've got you, and it's okay. Well, Ashley, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for this conversation and for everything you're doing as you help women cross that bridge and figure out what it looks like to ask for and receive help.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.